start this evening off with a little bit of silent meditation to relax our mind and switch our energy from running around to doing something a little bit more calm and concentrated. Okay, so we're just going to focus on our breath, letting our breath go in and out in a very natural way, but keeping our attention focused on the breath. We've been breathing most of our lives and probably haven't paid much attention to it. And yet our breath is something that connects us with the rest of the universe. And also, a part of the breathing meditation that I think is important is to let ourselves be content to sit here and breathe. Because we have so little contentment in American life. We're always taught that we should be doing something productive, and we should have something that we don't have. And we should be something more than we are. And we should prove ourselves how unique and wonderful and talented we are. And so we have very little satisfaction because the mind's always thinking what I am isn't good enough. So I think one important element in the breathing meditation is to allow ourselves to be satisfied to sit here and breathe. You know, we don't need to prove ourselves to anybody. You can't do it wrong. Yeah, just keep breathing. Any way you do it is fine. You know, but it's really an opportunity to practice contentment and see if we can allow our minds to be content doing what we're doing. Okay? So let's take a few minutes and just do that. Begin by feeling yourself sitting here. Enjoy being in the room with a group of like-minded people who support you in your spiritual endeavors. Thinking that we will learn and listen and share together this evening so that we can identify and then counteract our faults, so that we can recognize and enhance our good qualities. And to do this not simply for our own well-being, but recognizing that everybody wants to be happy and be free of suffering as much as we do. Let's work on ourselves so that we can contribute to the long-term benefit of all others. So just take a minute and let's put what we're about to do within this long-term altruistic perspective. And then open your eyes and come out of your meditation. Okay. So, we're in the third talk of a three-part series about emotional health. So we've talked a little bit about the Western and Eastern perspective on emotions, how there isn't a good translation into any Buddhist language of the Western word emotion, nor is there a concept of it. And we've talked a lot. Last week we talked about fear quite a bit, and self-centeredness, and all sorts of nice, wonderful things like that. So I want to continue. This week, the question came up, because I was telling you that Stephen wrote me an outline, so I think I've gotten through maybe 2 of the points so far. But one of the questions that he had on it was, are there good or and bad emotions, or are emotions in general good and bad? And I would like to, I'm glad he asked that question, because it shows a lot about how we think as Westerners. We think in terms of good and bad, yeah, right and wrong. And I'd like to propose that we pull ourselves out of that kind of way of looking at things and ask ourselves instead, are certain emotions beneficial or are they not beneficial? Are they realistic? or are they not realistic? Okay? And so to look at our emotions in terms of that instead of good or bad, because we tend, the good or bad tends to be another form of self-judgment. We were talking about judgment last week, remember? And, then we go, oh, I'm so bad because I have this emotion. And then I'm not supposed to feel angry. I'll give a whole talk about how to work with anger, and somebody will come up to me afterwards and said, you said we're not supposed to be angry. And I'll say, I did. Check the tape. Because I never say that, but people hear it. Okay? We hear I'm not supposed to feel the way I'm feeling. So that's all involved with, am I good, am I bad for feeling this? And I think that's a really unproductive way of looking at things. Whatever we feel at the moment. Okay? That's just how we feel. Okay? If you're mad, you're mad. Whatever it is, that's how you feel. I think the question is, after that, do I want to continue feeling that way? Okay? Is it beneficial for me to continue feeling that way? Is it realistic for me to continue feeling that way? Okay? So to look at it through that perspective instead of through this self-judgment of what I should and shouldn't be feeling. Do you get what I mean? Yeah? Do you find within yourself that you go through this process of judging yourself for what you feel? Yeah? And that can often be very, counterproductive. It's, what we feel is there. Okay? Let's not judge it or judge ourselves, but we can do a process of evaluation and see if this is something that we want to continue feeling, if it's conducive for human happiness, or if it's, inhibits human happiness. Okay? And so I think that's good to do that with all the different emotions that we feel. As I was saying last week, that we have a list in Buddhism of different mental factors. Some of them are attitudes and some of them are emotions that are favorable towards liberation, mental liberation, and ones that are counter to liberation. So it's sometimes helpful to learn this list and use it as a way to kind of study our mind and, help us identify our different emotions, and then to look inside and say, well, how do I feel when I'm feeling this? And does this really make me happy? And I think this is quite important because I find we have a lot of confusion really over what emotions make us happy. For example, I'll start with an easier one. Sometimes we feel that anger is a really good emotion, don't we? We put the label good on it. Anger is good. Anger makes it so that other people won't step on me, so that they won't take advantage of me, so that I'm able to have enough, adrenaline in my system to stand up and favor justice and speak out and, so rah, anger, because it gives me this of energy. Yeah? And so we think anger is very good. And I always tell the story of when I went to give a talk. It was in the University of Michigan to some people who were mediators in the communication department. And when I started talking about the disadvantages of anger, they got really upset with me. Anger is good! How can you say anger is bad? Anger is good in a conflict. Not too much and not at me, but it's good. It lets you know something's not right. So, I'd like to get away from that thing of is anger good or is anger bad, and just look at our own experience. Are we happy when we're angry? What do you say? Yes or no? No. So is anger conducive for human happiness? No. There it is. Okay? Now, the question isn't after that, well, I'm so bad because I'm angry, what do I do? Especially what do I do to make the other guy change so that I won't be angry. But the question question is to ask, is my anger, it's not beneficial, it doesn't bring me happiness. Is it realistic? Yeah. Am I seeing the situation accurately when I'm angry? And our usual feeling is, yes, I am. Yeah. I was talking the other week about doubting our emotions. We never doubt it when we're angry. We're completely totally self-confident in how we see the situation. I'm right, you're wrong. The solution is that you change and do it my way. Okay. But that doesn't make us happy, does it? Okay. So something's wrong. Our anger isn't really seeing things realistically if we wind up in that kind of mental space. And so then, that's where Buddhism comes in. It says, well, try looking at the situation from a bunch of different perspectives and then see if, you can see it in a different light. And if you have a more realistic way of looking at your anger, then you're going to feel differently. Okay, and another emotion that can be a little bit tricky about, is this good for human happiness or not, is the emotion of attachment. Yeah. So attachment in Buddhism has a very particular meaning. It's when we exaggerate the good qualities of someone or something or project good qualities that aren't there, and then our mind sticks to the object, the person, the situation, the idea, whatever it is. We're stuck. Yeah. And again, usually when we have attachment in our mind, we feel that attachment brings happiness. Yeah? I'm going to go out and get that new car this weekend. I've been saving up, and now I'm going to go get my, new red car, and, with all these fancy things in it, and my friends are going to think I'm great, but I'm not going to act like that really matters to me, but inside it really does. And I'm going to be so happy when I have this car. And so we think that's happiness, doesn't it? Our mind is filled with this attachment to the car, and we feel so happy. And we think that that's the happiness we're looking for in life. But then we get the car, and does the car make us everlastingly happy? How many cars have you owned? Yeah. Have any of them made you everlastingly happy? No, because if they did, you wouldn't have had to trade it in and get a new one. Okay? So, and actually, in fact, when you have the car, then you have more headaches. I've never owned a car my whole life. I've never owned a car. I've never paid car insurance. I've never paid repairs. Some of my friends wind up in car hell. I just have computer hell. But, they're in car hell. I've never had that happen. Of course, it's a little inconvenient sometimes getting places, but, you manage. But it's interesting, sometimes the thing we're most attached to gives us a whole new set of headaches. Okay? So to ask ourselves, when I'm feeling this real, excitement about getting something, it feels like it's happiness. But is it really, and is that thing really going to make us happy? Okay? So to do a little bit of reflection inside of our own hearts about what really makes us happy and what is happiness. Because happiness is what we all want. From morning till night, it's what we're looking for. But what in the world is it? And what leads us to happiness? Because, most of our life is a struggle for happiness. But do we get it? So, we've all had things in our life where we've gotten this feeling of happiness and this rush. Now I'm successful, or now I've made it, or now it's all fine, or whatever it is. But is that real happiness? Because I think what we're all searching for is a kind of happiness that doesn't go away. And yet, what we've had most of our life is the kind of happiness that does go away. Because if you had the happiness that didn't go away, you wouldn't be in here listening to me. talk about two different kinds of happiness. There's probably more than two different kinds, but two major blocks. One is a kind of worldly happiness that's based on our senses, and another one is happiness that comes through internal transformation, or spiritual happiness. So the happiness that comes, worldly happiness through our senses, this is what most people are involved in trying to get. Yeah, we want nice things to see, don't we? So we decorate our house, yeah, we paint the car and the house and whatever and things. We want to see beautiful things. That gives us a certain kind of pleasure. We want to hear nice sounds, so we like nice music. We especially like nice ego-pleasing sounds. Those are even better than nice music, I think. We like the sounds. I love you, and you're wonderful, and you're the best one. We love that, don't we? Yeah. And I've never met anybody like you. When they say it in that tone of voice, we don't like it. I've never met anybody like you. It depends a lot on the tone of voice. Yeah. We love sweet words, what we hear, they want me, they love me, they appreciate me, they value me. Oh, we eat that up, okay? We like nice things to smell. Yeah, so the guys put on aftershave lotion, and, we put on perfume and all sorts of things. And we have these things we spray all around our house. Actually, I think they smell worse than just fresh air. Mm-hmm. Some people like them. We like good food. Yeah, one of our frequent distractions in meditation is, what am I going to eat when the session's over? You just spend whole sessions planning the menu. It's great. We're very attached to good food, aren't we? How many hours in a week? How many hours in a week do you think about food? You spend thinking about food and acting upon it, buying it and cooking it and preparing it and eating it, and talking to other people about it. You go out, you meet your friends, and what do you talk about? Good food. Okay? So, very attached to good food. We like nice, pleasurable, tactile sensations. So we want to go lie on the beach, or we want to, go skiing, or we want a nice soft bed, or not too soft, just right. We want the temperature right. We want nice soft things, you want to pet a nice soft cat. You don't like when it claws you. So, with all sorts of nice tactile sensations. So, so much of our life is spent in looking for things that please our senses and taking care of our body, making our body feel good. And that gives a certain kind of happiness, but that happiness doesn't last for very long, because we eat and then it's done in 15 minutes or half an hour, and then a few hours later you're hungry again. Okay, you go to a concert and it's nice, and then it's over. So anything we're doing with our senses, it doesn't last very long. And then the more attachment we have to those sense pleasures, the more upset we get when we can't get them, or when we get the opposite of them. So you'll find people, the first trip they make to India, they freak out, because you walk down the street in Old Delhi and it smells like pee. It doesn't smell beautiful and pretty. And and you're sitting on a bus with the chickens and, jammed in, and it's 95 degrees and 85% humidity, and you're going, I want America again. When you came to India to have your adventure to talk to all your friends about. So we get very bummed out when we don't get the sense pleasures that we want. Okay? When we're expecting somebody to say, nice, kind, sweet words, and instead what they do is they blame us for things we didn't do. Yeah, we talked about that last week. Yeah? So, what I'm getting at is we get a certain kind of happiness from our senses, but it doesn't really cut it at the end of the day, does it? We're left exactly where we were at the beginning, except sometimes more dissatisfied. And in addition, we have a whole pile of negative karma that we've created in terms of how we've treated other people and our actions and what we've done to try and get the things that we think are going to bring us happiness, and what we've done to the people who have interfered with our happiness. And so, all sorts of various actions that we've done, and then, the happiness is gone, the objects are gone, and all that remains is that karmic imprint that, will influence what we experience in the future. Okay, so worldly happiness is a very dicey thing. Yeah, it's kind of dangerous because it looks very seductive, but it doesn't really satisfy, and instead it can really leave us in the lurch afterwards. Okay? I'm not saying it's useless. It's certainly better than suffering. Okay? But what I'm getting at is that it doesn't really fulfill us. Spiritual happiness, on the other hand, is what comes through internal transformation. So this is something that happens within ourselves. Nobody else can see it on the outside. It's something that we do internally. And it comes from working on our own minds, from working with our own emotions, from being able to identify and let go of our negative emotions, our disturbing emotions, and to identify and enhance our, good quality emotions. And that's, that spiritual transformation that happens inside enables us to be happy no matter what the external situation is. Okay? So it isn't like an on and off switch. It isn't like we're totally worldly or we're totally spiritual, and it isn't like you start practicing spirituality and, next week you've got it. But it's not like that. But the thing is that the more we focus on the internal transformation, the more what comes in our life is a sense of actual peace and stability and security. Okay? Whereas if we're trying to get peace and stability and security by rearranging the world and by changing the external things, which we can't control, we're going to wind up in this very difficult situation that we've been in so far. Okay? So the spiritual transformation, and that, the cultivation of those emotions are what the spiritual path is about. Okay? So basically, what spirituality is about, I think, is identifying, constructive attitudes and emotions and cultivating them, and identifying destructive attitudes and emotions and applying the counter forces. And that's basically it. Okay? Everything else you see is just a method to get you to that. And I really emphasize this because in Tibetan Buddhism we have a lot of attractive stuff. Okay? We have thrones, and we have brocade, and we have long horns, those long horns. And we have the deep chanting, and we have the short hats, and we have thrones, all different sizes of thrones, okay? And we have hats, yellow hats, black hats, red hats, big hats, small hats, we have all sorts of exciting stuff. I mean, we have incarnated lamas. We talk about who is higher than who, according to the throne size and according to the number of titles they have. And, Tibetan Buddhism can be very exotic and very amusing. It can be, can't it? Yeah, but that is not spirituality. That's just external exotica. Okay? Real spirituality, what all that external stuff is aimed at, is getting some internal change. Okay? So, that's all a method whether we use it to generate internal change or internal dissatisfaction is up to us, okay? But that's not really what at least Buddhism is about. And similarly, I don't think Christianity is about, bowing and chanting and incense and, public statements and all of this kind of thing. I think real Christianity is what you do in your heart, bringing the love of God, the love of human beings into your own heart. And nobody else can see that. It doesn't matter how many times we declare it and go, hallelujah, that doesn't mean anything. In the same way as Buddhists, it doesn't mean, we can all go. We're so devoted, aren't we? We have a contest, who can bow the lowest in front of the Lama, And, but that doesn't necessarily indicate anything about our actual mental state. So, the real spiritual happiness comes through the transformation, not through surrounding ourselves with external things. And that's really tempting when we're starting to get into a spiritual path. Did you see my new Buddha image? Look! It costs, $1,000. Do you have a Buddhist image that costs $1,000? And the eyes are painted by this very famous painter that came all the way from Kathmandu. And did you see all my nice autographed pictures with the lamas? Here's me with this lama and me with that one. They're all autographed. Yeah. And did you see my new prayer beads? This was given to me by so-and-so, and all my Buddhist books. I mean, this is just worldly concern, isn't it? But we do it. I think I'm so spiritual. Okay. Anyway, what I'm getting at, I hope you got the point, is about real happiness is through the internal change, not through the external display. And not through this thing about just looking to rearrange the world and, get all the sense pleasure objects that we like. Because that doesn't really bring the happiness that we want. Okay? Then, so, just to recapitulate, in Buddhist practice, we're not trying to get rid of emotions. Yeah. Repeat. We're not trying to get rid of emotions. There are some emotions that we're trying to increase and others that we are trying to get rid of. Okay? But not by stomping on them and repressing them and telling ourselves we're bad. Okay? And I really say this again, because last week I was explaining that some people think, all the Buddhists, you aim for detachment. So we're all detached. I don't care about anything. I'm detached. There's people getting killed in Iraq. So be it. I'm not attached to anything. That's not a Buddhist attitude. That's not what detachment is. Okay? When we're trying to counteract attachment, we're trying to reach a state of open-hearted concern for everybody. We're not trying to make ourselves into blobs. Quite important to understand. And when you meet the Buddhist teachers, they're not blobs, are they? Yeah. Does Holy Dalai Lama a blob? Does he walk into the hall, I couldn't impersonate my teacher. But he doesn't, So he's an example for us. Okay, now there's some emotions that it's kind of tricky, because some of them, there's a constructive form of the emotion and also a destructive form of the emotion. And these emotions can be really, really tricky. And so I want to just run through a few of them. There's probably many more, but just a few that will help us think. For example, sadness. Okay? In the West, sadness is considered an emotion. It's not among our list of mental factors in particular. But it's one we talk about in the West a lot, the emotion of sadness. I feel sad. Well, from a Buddhist viewpoint, there's two kinds of sadness. There's one kind of sadness that is a defilement that we want to eliminate. And there's another kind of sadness that it is actually productive for us to cultivate. Okay? So the sadness that we want to eliminate is the sadness that comes when we've lost something that we were attached to. Okay? So we didn't get the job that we wanted. We're separated from somebody that we cared about. They didn't say the nice, sweet, ego-pleasing words we were counting on them to say. We didn't achieve what we wanted to achieve. That kind of sadness, okay? That kind of sadness from a Buddhist perspective is something that we want to abandon on the path. That doesn't lead to any happiness. And that kind of sadness usually comes out of attachment and expectation. We were attached to something, we expected something to be in a certain way, and life didn't turn out the way we had anticipated, so we feel sad. Okay? And we can spend a lot of time in sadness, can't we? Yeah? We can spend a lot of time cultivating sadness, stuck in sadness, living in sadness, spreading sadness, being depressed in sadness, completely letting us overwhelm us. So that kind of sadness is something we want to abandon. On the other hand, on the spiritual path, when we're trying to cultivate a spiritual determination, or what's sometimes translated as renunciation, or the determination to be free of cyclic existence, there's a certain kind of sadness there that can be conducive for us. And that's the kind of sadness that comes when we realize that sense, pleasure, happiness isn't going to cut it. Okay? So until now, we've just been looking at I want this, and I want to do this, and I want to get this, and have this, and that. And at a certain point, when we meditate on the disadvantages of cyclic existence, we get to a point where we just feel disillusioned. Like everything I thought that was going to bring me happiness, it isn't. It's all impermanent. It doesn't have the power to bring me happiness. And there's a certain kind of sadness that comes with that kind of disillusionment. That actually is something productive for the spiritual path. Okay? Now, it might sound a little bit funny because when we first feel that as spiritual practitioners, when we go and go, everything that I was taught was going to make me happy actually isn't. There's a feeling of disillusionment. And sometimes we just kind of sit there and go, well, then what? Then what am I supposed to do to be happy? Okay? What are we supposed to do? Well, there's lots of positive mental states to cultivate, okay? But we won't have the energy to cultivate the positive mental states until we have the disillusionment, that comes from just seeing that what we've been distracting ourselves with so far is not going to bring happiness. Okay? Are you getting what I'm saying? Is this making some kind of sense to you? It might be, if I make another more particular example, maybe you have, okay, let's say you take refuge in food. This is one of our common refuge objects in America, the refrigerator. Right? You're depressed. What do? Go to the refrigerator. Right? I take refuge in the refrigerator. In the shopping mall and in the TV set. 3 objects of refuge in America. Okay, the first one, the refrigerator. Yeah. So we always seek happiness in the refrigerator. I'm upset, I'm sad, I'm lonely, I'm depressed. Yeah, I'm disappointed. I go to the refrigerator. There's always something nice to, awaiting for me there. Okay, and if I eat it, it'll make me happy. And so we do this. This is our habit pattern for many years, let's say. And then at a certain point, when we're like enormous and we can't fit in one chair on the, when you have to start buying 2 airplane seats, yeah, you're in trouble. And you say, wow, I've got to change this habit. I've got to do something about it. So you start looking at why do I eat and does it really make me happy? then is this a good object of refuge? And you come to see, no, it doesn't. You know, it ruins my health. I actually often feel disgusted with myself. Sometimes I even feel physically ill, you know. And there's a certain sense of disillusionment, of sadness that comes then, right? You know, like, wow, I've been taking refuge in the refrigerator and I can't do it anymore because I realize I'm not going to be happy doing this. So at first there's this sense of loss, okay, and of sadness. But that's a good kind of sadness, isn't it? If it's going to make you break a bad habit. Because you need to get to that point where you get disillusioned, and then you're going to start to say, well, what can I do instead of taking refuge in the refrigerator? You know, what will make my mind more calm, and what can I put my energies towards? Okay, so that's just a little bit of an example. Yeah, I think people who deal with substance abuse, you know, very often I correspond with a number of prisoners. A number of them have had substance abuse problems, and almost all of them tell me that they have to hit bottom and be completely disillusioned before they have the energy to start changing. So it's that element of disillusionment, of sadness, that can pull us out of a counterproductive way of living. So it's the same thing on the spiritual path, you know. At first, sometimes there's this feeling of sadness and disillusionment, but it's actually something good, because it'll help us break our attachment to useless things and instead steer our energy in a really positive direction. So we don't just stay there with the sadness, we use the sadness to push us towards something that's worthwhile. Okay? So do you see how there can be two kinds of sadness? Communicating? Yeah? Okay, another one that there can be two kinds of is fear. And this is very tricky, yeah, especially when it comes to translation, because, you know, those of you who have been to Buddhist teachings that have been literally translated is, you know, you should have fear of going to the lower realms. And we all go, ah! You know, I left Christianity because I was tired of being afraid of hell, you know. And now I come to Buddhism and they're telling me to be afraid of hell. You know, so if I'm Buddhist, I might go to Christian hell, and if I'm Christian, I might go to Buddhist hell. What am I going to do? You know, get me out of here. Yeah, so that kind of fear is ridiculous. I mean, that's clearly an obstacle on the path, isn't it? Okay? This kind of emotional panic, freak-out fear, whether we cultivate it thinking that it's something virtuous, but we've gone off the wrong end, or whether it's just our fears like, you know, I'm terrified to give a public talk, yeah, or I'm terrified my first day of work, or, you know, I'm scared to go see so-and-so because of what they're going to think of me or what they're going to say to me. Okay, that kind of fear is something that we want to abandon on the path, right? Yeah? It's not very realistic. It's not very beneficial. And who's the star of the show of fear? Me! Yeah? Fear is all about me, isn't it? Yeah? So it just gives ego like a lot of, you know, feeling of importance. You know, ego feels alive when it's afraid. So, that kind of fear is something we want to eliminate on the spiritual path. A kind of quote fear that can be good for us, okay, in a simple example, is when you are merging on the highway. Do you have a certain kind of caution or awareness of danger as you're pulling onto the highway? You better have. Yeah? I mean, when you teach your kids to drive, don't you teach them that? You know, be careful when you're going on the highway. You know, be aware, because if you aren't aware, you could go down the highway and knock somebody or get knocked off yourself. Okay? So that kind of sense of potential danger can be something that's beneficial. You know, when you're driving, that we need that. It helps us be alert and keep safe. Yeah? There's many other situations in our life where we have to have that kind of awareness of potential danger because it brings on more vigilance, more mindfulness of of a positive way to live and to feel. Yeah? So that kind of fear is something that's conducive for happiness. And on a spiritual path, it can be conducive for pushing us in a proper direction. So, for example, if we realize the value of our precious human life, and we have a sense of awareness that it's not going to last forever, and that we could, in our future lives, find ourselves in less opportune circumstances, that kind of fear is good because it makes us wake up and appreciate our lives so that we live our lives in a really vibrant way. Okay? It's not the freak out fear. It's a wisdom kind of fear. Okay? You getting what I'm saying? So there's two kinds of fear there. One to be abandoned, one that can be very useful for us. Similarly with hope. Okay? Hope, there can be an advantageous and a disadvantageous one. Yeah. We hear in some Dharma instructions, give up all hope and all fear. Okay? When it's talking about that, when giving up the fear, they're talking about the panicked fear. They're not talking about this productive sense of caution. When they're talking about give up all hope, it means all attachment and expectations to getting the things we want and having life turned out the way we want it to be. Okay? So when we're full of this kind of hope that is basically a lot of expectation about the way things could be, then our life turns out so miserable. And, I see myself sometimes doing that. Something's going to happen in the day and I'll say, I hope it happens like this. And then I'll realize my hope doesn't do any good. It doesn't make it happen and it doesn't make it not happen. But it makes me have a lot of expectation so that I'm setting myself up to be disappointed and let down if it doesn't happen according to my little mental plan. Okay? So those kind of hopes are something that we want to abandon because we just get all tangled up in that. Okay? However, that doesn't mean abandon all hope because there's a positive kind of hope. And that's that kind of hope is an aspiration for the goodness in the world. Okay? In other words, that hope is knowing that sentient beings have the potential to create the cause of happiness. It's the hope that knows that we have the seeds of compassion and love for each other in our hearts. And, having that awareness, then wanting to activate those seeds, to water those seeds in ourselves and water those seeds in others. Okay? So that kind of hope is something that's actually very, very productive for us. Okay? You see the difference here? Okay, so what I'm getting at, and what I think is very important in our practice, and also for assessing the kinds of learning to evaluate our own emotions, is to be able to identify what we're feeling, and then also kind of see the ramifications. And if it's one of these emotions that can have both a constructive and a destructive aspect, to be able to differentiate between the two of them. Okay? Another one that's like that, where there's a constructive and a destructive aspect, is desire. And this, again, is a real tricky translation one, because you'll find some translators will translate a certain Buddhist word as desire, meaning what I call attachment, when we have false expectations and projections and we glom onto something, okay? They'll translate that word as desire. And you'll see this in some books. And then, the teacher goes on to talk about, eradicate all desire and you'll have happiness. And that's where this notion comes from of, well, I eradicate all desire, so what do? I don't desire anything. Yeah. So, again, here, when the teacher's saying that, there's two kinds of desire, okay? There's the desire that's based on attachment and expectations and clinging. That kind of desire we want to let go of because it gets us all tangled up in things. There's another kind of desire that means aspiration for what is beneficial, okay? I desire to cultivate love and compassion in my heart. It's a nice kind of desire, isn't it? I desire to work for the benefit of others. I desire to become a Buddha. I desire to meet a qualified teacher. I desire to make use of my talents in the world. Okay? That kind of desire is definitely to be cultivated. That's something useful on the path. And it's not attachment. Okay? So I really want to clarify this because some people begin to think, well, as a Buddhist, you're not supposed to, desire anything. Did you hear that? I'm not supposed to desire anything. This is not the way of thinking. This is not what the Buddha taught, okay? Instead, actually, what we're trying to do on the path is to cultivate a lot of beneficial aspirations, and, cultivate those aspirations and use them to enthuse ourselves and activate ourselves and make our mind happy so that we put our energy in a really wonderful direction. Okay, so that's just a little bit talking about how some emotions might have two aspects to them, two different definitions. Okay, there's also some other emotions where we call that there's a near enemy. Okay, I don't know if you've ever heard that expression. Something that's similar to something else but is actually the opposite of it. A near enemy. It's near, but it's an enemy. It's the opposite. So, for example, compassion and pity. Superficially, we might confuse them very easily. People often do. Oh, you poor person. Look at you. Your life is such a mess. I feel so sorry for you. You're so full of anger. I really feel so sorry because you're so full of anger and you make all these enemies. And we think that that's a positive emotion. I feel sorry for them. Look how compassionate I am. That's not the Buddhist definition. That doesn't correspond with the Buddhist definition of compassion. That falls more into what we call pity. Okay? Compassion is wanting oneself or others to be free of suffering and its causes. Now, what's the difference between compassion and pity? Okay, this is an interesting thing to examine in our own mind. When do we feel genuine compassion and when do we feel pity? Because lots of times we mask our anger thinking we're feeling compassionate, but we're actually feeling pity as a way to comfort ourselves or mask our anger. Okay. I feel so sorry for that poor jerk at work. He does everything wrong and really blew this project we were working on. I feel so sorry for him. Inside we're fuming. Okay, but we want to look polite. So we feel sorry for them instead. Okay. When we have pity, when we feel sorry for somebody, there's a power differential. Okay? I'm up here, very together, very confident, wonderful. And there's that slob down there, so inferior. And great, glorious me, out of mind, out of mind, compassion and concern. I'm going to save this poor slob. And we act like that, don't we? don't we? No? And we develop all sorts of stuff about it, especially with family members. Oh, you fell into your old habit of getting drunk on Friday night, didn't you? I did it again. But I am your loyal sister, and I'm going to stick by you and pull you out of this. And don't you forget it. Because I am sacrificing another Friday night's sleep out of compassion and love for my dear brother who's an alcoholic. You know? Okay, this is pity. That's not compassion. Okay? Compassion is where we reach out to somebody as if we were reaching out to ourselves. Where there isn't this power differential. Okay? Shantideva, this great Buddhist sage, Indian sage, had the analogy of the hand picking the thorn out of the foot. Okay? The hand just reaches down and picks the thorn out, and life goes on. Okay? That's compassion on the part of the hand, isn't it? The hand doesn't go on this big trip about, foot, you did it again. Why don't you watch where you're stepping? I'm tired of the hand. Save you again. You know, the hand just reaches down, pulls the thorn out, no big deal. Okay? What enables that to happen is that the hand and the foot feel like they're part of the same organism. Okay? So when we help others in the same way, that because we feel like we're part of the same organism, okay, then what's the organism? It's the organism of all sentient beings. Organism of all living beings. Okay? When we reach out and help like that, that's compassion. But when we make a difference between me and the other, and I'm reaching down to save them, it becomes pity. Okay? But you see how they can be easily mistaken if we're not careful? And how we can fool ourselves? Another set of near enemies are love and attachment. And we're really confused about this one in America. Yeah. Especially because, you know, on the radio we have all the love songs. Actually, from the Buddhist view, we would call that all the attachment songs. Yeah. Because that's not love, you know. Love in Buddhism has a very particular view. It's where you want somebody to have happiness and its causes. It's very simple. I want you to have happiness and its causes. I want me to have happiness and its causes. We love ourselves, okay? But we confuse this with attachment. You know? How do we, because they both have this aspect of being drawn to somebody, of being attracted to somebody. They both have this aspect of feeling warm and, you know, wanting to be close. So we get them confused, you know. And we say, I love you, but what we actually mean is I'm attached to you. And what's the difference? Well, attachment has a lot of strings. Yeah. And attachment usually goes, you know, I love you, because we can't tell the difference between love and attachment. I love you because you're nice to me, because you give me presents, because you agree with my ideas, because you comfort me when I'm depressed, because you're rich, because you're well-educated, because you tell me I'm wonderful, because you protect me, because you fulfill my emotional needs, because you know. And so there's a whole checklist. Yeah, you do this for me, therefore I love you. And that's why so many of our relationships get really messed up, because when they stop doing it, we stop loving them. Okay, because it was, you know, often a lot of confusion there between love and attachment. And actually, I would say most of our relationships are a combination of love and attachment. And the more we can recognize and be honest about this, I think the better off we're going to be. If we say, oh, it's just attachment, I'm so full of attachment, you know, that's one extreme. But if we fool ourselves with all sorts of good, nice Buddhist language, oh, I love this. You know, he just happens to be good looking. And I love him so much, but I'm not attached to him at all. You know, we're fooling ourselves. You know, we might as well admit there's some attachment in there, okay? Yeah, but there's also some love. But, you know, the more we can identify what part of his attachment and one part is love, the easier it's going to be to actually have a healthy or a healthier relationship. Okay. Another set of near enemies are stubbornness and determination. Oh, I see some people chuckling. Who's stubborn besides me? Oh, some of you aren't stubborn. Too bad this time doesn't apply to you. So, stubborn means when you just sit there and you say, I'm not going to do anything different than what I'm doing. Okay? She I don't know if people heard her. Mm-hmm. So, you know, stubborn is when we just dig our heels in and say, I'm going to do this, and I don't care about anybody else in the rest of the world. I want this, you know, and we just dig our heels in, okay? Now, there's a difference between that and determination, isn't there? Yeah. What's the difference between being stubborn and being determined? Mm-hmm.
Determined has more patience, it feels like.
Yeah, there's a certain element of patience and acceptance with determination. With stubbornness, there's an edge to it, isn't it? I want this, and there's no ifs, ands, and buts. You know, when we're determined, we recognize there's going to be some ifs, ands, and buts. You know, that the life doesn't come out the way we want it to. But we're patient and we're willing to go through the ifs, ands, and buts to get to our end because we're determined, because we see the value in what we do. Okay? When we're stubborn, there isn't that aspect of patience, and we tend to become quite upset, you know, at anybody who intervenes with what we think we want. Yeah. So again, on the spiritual path, we need determination. That's an essential element. You know, a very strong attitude that we need. But we don't need stubbornness. But again, sometimes we can't always tell the difference between them. We can be stubborn about our philosophical views, or we can be firm about our philosophical views. There's a difference. Yeah. We can be determined to generate love and compassion, or we can be stubborn about, you know, I'm going to practice like this and nobody can tell me otherwise. And I say this because lots of us, especially at the beginning of our practice, and sometimes later on, that's true, can be a little bit stubborn. Yeah, we're not at all flexible. We have our mental conception of what it means to practice Buddhism, and, you know, we won't hear for any other way. Or just in our regular life, we get very stubborn about something. And there's no flexibility. It's got to be like this. Whereas determination, there's this quality of, you know, it's going to take a while, but this is something worthwhile. So I'm going to go in that direction. Even if it takes years, decades, eons. Mm-hmm. And definitely in a spiritual practice, we need that long-term view. We need that sense of determination. Okay? So again, we want to be able to differentiate those two things within ourselves. Because we can, if we don't, we can get real confused and get in some difficulties with other people. Okay, so that's just a little bit, you know. I was trying this talk to get more specific about some things. Okay, so talking about this whole idea of good and bad emotions, versus instead putting it into the perspective of what's realistic and beneficial and what's not. Okay? And then looking at how some emotions can have one interpretation that's something we want to cultivate and another interpretation that's something we want to abandon. And then also talking about these near enemies, how to differentiate them. Okay? So the whole idea in this whole discussion is to use it as a way to look inside and to understand ourselves. And then, through understanding ourselves, then to go through this process of what I was calling spiritual practice, which is increasing the constructive and beneficial emotions, the realistic ones, and decreasing the other ones. Okay, now time for question, comments, anything you want. Yeah.
I was thinking, like, talk about sadness and good and bad sadness. And in Western psychology, there's a lot of emphasis on feelings that you have locked away. You need to access those and feel them and get rid of them. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering, from a Buddhist perspective, how we think about, like, well, I had this horrible traumatic incident, and I have to focus on what to do about that.
Okay. So the question is, in Western psychology, there's a lot of emphasis on revealing things that we've repressed or suppressed or haven't looked at, and how much energy do we put into that? I'm not sure.
Catharsis.
Pardon me?
Catharsis.
Oh, yeah. Catharsis about it. Buddhism doesn't talk about that very much. I think if you do a meditation practice, your stuff's going to come up. Okay? And I think that's one reason why we have a hard time doing a consistent meditation practice. Because we have a sense that our stuff is going to come up if we actually sit on the cushion. So instead, we get very busy instead. I've got to clean the house, I have to write my paper, I'm going to read this Buddhist article. Yeah? I'm going to read this book, I'm going to go to teachings, I'm going to watch a Buddhist movie, I'm going to return these phone calls, I'm going to go do some social work, I'm going to do anything. I'm going to be the busiest of the busy because sitting on the cushion is scary. Because when I sit down, there's this little inkling that my stuff's going to come up. Yeah, and who wants that? Yeah. Actually, my own experience has been, now when my stuff comes up, I'm actually quite delighted because it's okay, it's coming up now, I have a chance to clean it out, I have a chance to look at it. Because we spend so much time and energy avoiding our stuff that we get exhausted. We have to keep thinking of more and more ways to distract ourselves from becoming our own friend. And it becomes totally exhausting. So I think just in the process of doing a regular daily practice, a process of doing retreat, whether you go on retreat for a week or 2 weeks or whatever, our stuff automatically comes up. We don't have to force it to come up. It's there. Okay? So there isn't this emphasis in Buddhism about, I've got to look at, what happened in my childhood and, what happened here and there and analyze it and find out the hidden reason for why I'm so screwed up. Buddhism just has this thing where we're all screwed up. Yeah, remember, I talked about what's emotional health. The first talk, emotional health, is liberation and enlightenment. So by definition, the rest of us are neurotic. So, let's be happy with that. It's just, okay, we don't need to put on any big to-dos. We're less than perfect. Fine, let's get on with life. I've seen sometimes people who have really put so much emphasis on, I've got to uncover, what I'm feeling. I remember one time going to a workshop, a Stephen Levine workshop, where, he has microphones in the audience and people talk about what they're feeling and things. And there was one young man, who was up at the microphone and he was saying, I've been in therapy and my therapist tells me I have repressed anger. I'm trying so hard to be angry, but I can't be angry. And, you know, I what do I do with all this repressed anger, which they tell me I have, but I don't know about? You know, and this poor guy was in, you know, so much mental anguish about it. I just wanted to say, relax. You know? You don't have to get angry to make your therapist feel like they were right. You know, just relax. If anger comes, it comes. If it doesn't come, great. Yeah, you don't have to, you know, to think that you're supposed to be angry about something. No? Because sometimes people, you know, something happened and some people are angry about it, and some people aren't angry about the same thing. And if somebody's telling you you should be angry about that, but you're not, you just get, like, really brings a lot of confusion. Mm-hmm.
The distinction between compassion and pity, I have a hunch that there's a third emotion that muddies the boundary even more. It's hard to put it into one word in English. It's a rejoicing, whether overt or subliminal, at the plight of someone else.
Okay, so you're saying that maybe between compassion and pity, there's a thing of rejoicing at the plight. Here, I think you're meaning what, like the unhappy circumstances of somebody else?
An example from way back, right after the Chernobyl disaster, the late comedian Sam Kinison, in one of his routines, just blurted out, "Yeah, Ruski, better you than us." Now that's overt, but it's that kind of thing.
Okay, so that's yeah, better you have the suffering than I have the suffering. Yeah, that I can see how you would put that between the pity and the compassion. For me, that tends more on the pity side. And actually, I would say that's more of a way of expressing anger than anything else. You know, rejoicing in somebody else's suffering. That doesn't even have the overt sense of affection that pity has.